life comes experience. With experience comes knowledge. And with knowledge comes inspiration. This is the Aisha Oromia Ali Show.
Homeland. You taught us how to listen to the birds sing in the morning, to play in the rain that will join the lakes and the rivers nearby. Like the mountains of Sapian, your children are beautiful. Their dark skin tone precious like rubies, like diamonds. Braids as intricate as the rise and fall of kingdoms, as intricate as praises of the strong and the recollection of the past. Homeland, I miss you. I talk about you endlessly to the point that other homelands get jealous. They tell me I should forget about you, that I should forget the words my mother used to praise me, the words that she used to scold me. I want to remember the essence of your soul. Tell me about the legends and the heroes that lived long time ago. The heroes who've defended you, who have awakened the sleep and reminded them of their past glory. Tell me how they fabricated your history. I've heard about the bruises that have not healed yet. But be assured your history lies in the heart of all those who love you, all those who have gathered under your other tree to govern. Please tell me of the fearless heroes that have killed lions, the numerous dynasties that existed on your land. Tell me the stories of Jara Abba Gada, Tadassa Biru, Elamok Iltu. Tell me about the legacy of Sheikh Muhammad Rashad Bakhri Sapalo. My love for you is unconditional. I know you've taught your children the best lessons, to love your kin, to love all of our people, because without that, our future is dark. Homeland, please tell me your folk tales and your riddles. I'm starting to forget the stories of the Butu who ate people and the stories of the slick fox. I'm forgetting the stories that have brought me closer to my kin and the stories that have fostered so much endless laughter. While distance might keep us apart, I'm reminded of you wherever I go. Your offspring will continue to share the names of your heroes, the lyrics to your songs and the prayers and supplications in the language you have taught us. You see, we are nothing without you. We pray for you in all parts of the world, in mosques and churches, that your people will stay united and that the future will be brighter for you.
Welcome to the Aisha Oromia Ali Show. On today's show, we have a special guest with us today. We have Rhoda. Welcome to the show, Rhoda.
Thank you for having me.
So I'd like to start off with your name. I really like your name. It's very unique. Mm-hmm. What does your name mean?
So Rhoda is the Oromo version of the Islamic/Arabic word Rolda, which means one of the heavens in Arabic. But a lot of times people would ask me what it means is because of the different pronunciation, but I just explained to them that when it comes like the Muslim communities, we all have kind of a twist to our names that makes it unique based on our cultural background.
So what do you consider your cultural background or a part of your identity?
Yeah. So cultural background, I identify as Oromo, as African, as American. It's kind of like part of a global culture in general. But when it comes to like other parts of my identity, I would say Muslim is one of the core identities.
So what would you consider identity in regards to race?
When it comes to race, I really think that's based on the society that you live in and based on how conscious people are and how race has played a huge factor. So in certain parts of the world, like let's say for example, Scandinavia, historically it's been a very homogenous culture, like white European culture. In the US, it's very multicultural because of the fact that there are folks from different backgrounds that have come here and they've all come here in different ways. Some have been brought here as slaves and some came here to look for better opportunities and different things like that. So I think it really just depends on the society that you live in. And so based on the encounters of those individuals, racial and like identities and categories were created. And a lot of times it has to do with who had power and who had privilege and who lack those who lack access to resources and opportunities. And so, in general, I would say the individuals that live in a particular society and the dynamics that the dynamics that played out in a particular place kind of defines what race is and how people understand race.
Okay, so in terms of race, you mentioned like Scandinavian countries and like America, and the comparison. How relevant is race in today's society?
I would say it's very relevant. And I think it's just because of the fact that it's something that can be ignored. In certain places, they try to promote homogeneity, right? Like where they want everyone to conform to a particular identity that has been established by those in power. So I'll just kind of give an example of the U.S. With the U.S., historically, the goal when every time an immigrant group comes to the U.S., the goal has been to get them to kind of assimilate, to fit into kind of the mainstream culture, which tend to be kind of white Anglo-Saxon heritage. But more recently, I would say probably in like the past 20, 30 years, there has been an open-mindedness about accepting multiculturalism and allowing people to embrace different identities, or allowing them to be proud of being Black, but at the same time American, and not kind of forcing everyone into the one understanding of American. And so while in general, while like that's being more acceptable, at the same time that's not consistent for every part of the country. Obviously, there's still a large group of people who are very uninformed about the experiences of the minority communities here, and so for that reason, they tend to have certain understanding and certain stereotypes, and a lot of those mindsets tend to shape institutions that are created in just kind of the larger dynamics that affect how our experiences are, and particularly me as a Black person in America. So I would say in the U.S. it's definitely a huge part of people's experiences and identities, but at the same time it really depends on how conscious you are of it. And a lot of times, even if you don't want to be conscious of it, your experiences and just the external factors make you conscious of it as much as you try to avoid it.
Yeah, I mean the United States has had like a long history with racism, and as you've already told our viewers that it is quite present right now. I mean you're probably aware of the Black Lives Matter social media campaign about what happened in Ferguson and with the whole Trayvon Martin and other things. What is your take on all these issues?
I mean, Black Lives Matter. I feel like it's a great campaign to make people aware of just the many existing issues that Black communities have had. So these aren't new issues; they've existed for many years, and they've been ignored by those in power and those that we have elected as our leaders for many years. And so I just think that it's sad that it's something that is still continuing in the 21st century, and that the fact that we have to argue as Black people that our lives matter when it should be a given thing that all lives matter. And it's also a really sad thing to kind of just see a lot of people's reactions to the fact that we are being assertive about the fact that our lives matter, and the fact that we are just making a stance saying that this is a racial thing instead of just a police brutality, or just instead of just saying it's like just kind of like it's like a basic police encounters with like Black individuals. So I think that we as a society have so much to learn about the fact that minority communities in the U.S. have had particular experiences, and especially with the police and with the police community and with just police enforcement communities in general, that have shaped our experience of how we view them, and the fact that we fear them more than see them as people who are there to protect us. And so I think it's really important for folks who come from more of a privileged background where they don't have to deal with this daily to kind of get out of their shoes and just try to understand how it feels to be a Black person or a Hispanic person or an Asian person in a predominantly white country, and try to understand what some of their experiences are. Because unless they do that, then it's really difficult for them to see why campaigns like Black Lives Matter are such an important campaign, like in our current political society.
Yeah, I see you've used like terminology such as minority and immigrant groups, but even these terminologies are terminologies that, you know, the predominant group or the colonizer or oppressors have given these people who, like, the oppressors migrated to this country as well. So I think that's very important for all of us to bear in mind, because how can you call millions of people a minority?
Right.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I totally understand. And I think that's more in the context of American history. You're right. So it is based on the political dynamics of America that have created these categories. And even racial categories didn't exist a while back. It was created by those in power who were just trying to find ways to categorize people to kind of accomplish certain agendas, or just to help them understand how they can view the world, right? So even racial categories such as Black, Asian, Latino, these are all constructed. And so same thing with minority, majority, right? Like just categories. I mean, in the U.S., yes, majority is with the white community, but at the same time, Latinos are also such a large community, and so, like you can definitely go into this a bit more and try to and see that the way that we categorize minority versus majority is very much unique to American history.
I'm glad that you actually mentioned the racial clarifications, because where I'm from, like as you can tell from my accent, I'm from Australia. We don't have any of that here. When I came to Minnesota, America, it was quite different for me, actually. It was kind of like a cultural shock, because when you fill out applications, you've got like Black, Hispanic, white. I'm like what's this kind of a thing? So it was very evident that race was especially quite unique to the United States, and that validates like your point, what you were explaining to us earlier. And in terms of racism, have you had any encounters or experiences with racism?
Yes. And I would say that almost everyone I know has had some type of encounters, and it's just because of the fact that we live in a really race conscious society, and the fact that there's a lot of people who don't understand how to live in a multicultural society where they should be accepting people, and also just loving to kind of live in an environment where there's diversity, right? And so my encounters were once when I was in college, I was told basically that I should go back home, like that I should go back to my country. And the second one was I was called a towelhead. And they were both very, really scary and sensitive parts of my life. The first one, I was really shocked because I wasn't sure what gave like that understanding that I'm from a different country. Is it because of the fact that I dress different from kind of your mainstream or people in the mainstream community? Or is it because of my skin tone? Or is it because of the fact that by looking at me, they could tell that I belong to an East African community? And so, and I would say that that's probably very unique to living in the Twin Cities or being in Minnesota, because of the fact that there's a huge East African population. So if I was, let's say, if I was in Chicago or somewhere else, a lot of times they would probably just think that I was a foreigner because of maybe the way I dressed or wore my hijab. But here, a lot of times, they could pinpoint the fact that I'm East African by being East African, especially who's this way, that I am a Muslim East African. And so I know a lot of people who've had negative experiences because of the fact that there are some people who have really negative understanding of East African communities. And that could be based on one encounter or something, and that shapes their whole mindset about who we are. And it's kind of really sad to hear that, because I think it's really important that we should be there, that we are welcomed, and that we are seen as an important fabric of Minnesota culture, Minnesota communities, because we've played huge roles, and I think that the future is bright because of the fact that we have so much to bring to the communities here, but at the same time so much to learn. And so not everyone sees it that way. But my second encounter, I was called a towelhead, and that phrase, it was my first time being called that, but at the same time, I knew that it was one of those things that some Muslim women have been called, and it was just really, really sad to hear that, because the fact that I'm being called a certain thing based on the way I'm dressed. And sometimes you can say that I grew up in a bubble because I just felt so accepted for wearing a hijab because there's so many other people in the Twin Cities. But at the same time, when you hear individuals call you those words, you're like, oh, there are a lot of people who affiliate this with really negative things, and who probably see me, right, as like a very stereotypical, like a Muslim woman who's like forced to wear this, or who isn't educated, who isn't this, that, just because of the fact that they hear negative things about the hijab in the media or elsewhere.
It's really unfortunate that these stereotypes and these generalizations actually exist, and to the point where people are actually forced to be racist to one another. But what's important as well is not that we have to normalize racism, but it's important how we deal with it, because racism can occur not only, to people that look like you and I, but it can occur to anyone. So how were you able to deal with these racist encounters?
I think the fact that I grew up in an urban area just kind of really made me strong when it comes to my cultural identity and also living in a multicultural environment. So, but at the same time, when I heard those phrases, I was still shocked that you never know how to react. You never know what's the proper way to react, because when it comes to emotions, when it comes to being insulted based on your heritage, based on your faith, those are the most personal things ever. And so, from my experience, the way I reacted was I tend to kind of lecture a little bit more than shouting at the person, and that's just because of the way I deal with issues. But I just told those people, like, you're being prejudiced and you're being racist, and this is not acceptable, and that I am just as American as you are, and we can't look at me and generalize that I'm from a different country, right? And so, like, that's how I reacted, but that's just the way I deal with situations. But at the same time, there's a huge spectrum of the ways that people react to these types of things. Some people probably get really angry or get really frustrated, and some people are really passive about it as well. And so I just think that there are different ways people deal with it, because when it comes to emotions, everyone has different ways of managing it. But at the same time, I think it's totally valid if someone is angry at those situations, and it's totally valid if someone is really hurt. And so I think it's really important that we recognize that within the community, within our communities of people of color, right? So that it's okay for people to react to these things differently, and it's okay for us to have different opinions about them as well. So I think it's important that we kind of create accept the fact that there's different ways.
There's different ways of dealing with it. In terms of identity crisis, now this is a term that's like regularly used. Oh, that person has an identity crisis. This person has an identity crisis. What do you think people mean when they refer to people who have identity crises?
So I was kind of refer to like the way that I understand this, or the way I understand identity crisis based on my experience. And a lot of times it has to do with kids who grew up in a multicultural environment where their parents are of a different cultural background, and the kids are confused in regards to what they are or what identities they should embrace or language to speak or things like that. And then another one is when their parents are first generation and they're from a different country, and the kids are either born or raised here. And a lot of times there's just so many different dynamics that impact all of that. And so the ones that I've encountered are usually the ones who tend to stay away from a particular part of their heritage because of the fact that they associate negativity with that, and that could be because they see their parents who are from a different cultural background as not as progressive as their other counterparts, or as their friends who are from a mainstream community. And so for that reason, they try to assimilate or just mold into a certain type of category or into a certain type of being that other people have told them is the right way to be. And so there's this huge disconnect, especially at a young age, when they don't know how to combine those, or they don't know how to understand their emotions or understand their different identities and bring them together. But I think it really just depends on what stage they are in their lives. Like, most of the time, identity crisis happens when people are younger, because they don't know how to process their emotions or process the experience that they're having with their families and the experience they're having in a larger mainstream community. But at the same time, I've also noticed that when they go through these journeys, and these journeys are really important journeys, it's really important that they experience those things and they embrace all their feelings, so that they come to a place where they are more self-aware about who they are, what their values are, and the fact that they can be happy and embrace different parts of their identities.
So is it external or internal factors that would contribute to identity crisis?
I would say in the beginning it's external. It's external because it comes from what they're being taught by their family members, what they're being taught by friends or folks in their schools, or just outside of home. And then they, a lot of times, so then those experiences kind of make up their emotions, right? And then afterwards it becomes internal. So I feel like it's both external and internal, but in the beginning it's definitely external because you're not shaped, because when you're first born, you're like basically like a blank canvas, and then you get molded into into the society, like into the expectations and into the expectations of your society. And so yes, I would definitely say it's external factors and internal. It just really depends on what stage in your life.
So what role do parents or family members play in the development of an individual's identity?
I would say that the parents play one of the most essential roles. They are the ones who build the foundations in the beginning, but at the same time who still continue to reinforce a lot of the way that their kids view the world and the way the kids view their identities. So I think it's really important that in the beginning the parents create like an inclusive foundation, right, where they're teaching them their values and their principles and their heritage and their language, but at the same time who allow their kids to have kind of a bigger room to also define themselves and kind of learn about what else exists in the world and just kind of enrich their identities. And so I really think that that's one of the most essential part of a kid's upbringing, because if they're being taught to basically grow up in one particular way, then they're not being open-minded to the world. And the world has so much to contribute to a child's upbringing. And a lot of times, or parents could teach certain negative stereotypes or things like that kind of excludes you from being exposed and from learning from others. And so parents, they would play the most essential role. And also as you're growing up, they continue playing an active role based on obviously how involved they are, right? But as an adult, you still need a reinforcement from your parents that you're living your life in a way that makes them proud of you, or that you are kind of taking on roles in whatever capacity, whatever it is that you're doing. So you still need that support and that reinforcement from your parents. And so I would say it just really depends on what part of what stage, but the parents will always like play a role.
I'll take you a little bit back now, and we spoke about expression of racism or whatever you're dealing with. Now, art is a form of expression, and we know that you are a poet. You write poems. How did you begin writing poetry?
Mm-hmm. So I started writing poetry like around the age of 12, and so I've kept a personal diary for many years. And some people might think that's kind of silly, but I think it's just a really like valuable thing to have, because then you're able to kind of see how you were thinking or feeling in different parts of your life. And so I just started writing because I just thought it was just like really interesting. And then I started realizing too that like I could rhyme with words, and when I read it later, it just like flows and sounds really well. And so I started writing in English, and then when I was a teenager, I also started writing in Oromifa, and that definitely helped because I didn't really think that I had those skills, just because I only have like a fourth grade education in Oromifa. But right now, as I got older, it became kind of more in English, but at the same time, it was more of to express all the different things I was experiencing, to kind of also to just have it in written format, because then it helps you process all the emotions, and it helps you have I feel like more of an advanced understanding of yourself and also your emotions. But a lot of times it comes from me being involved and also in different groups. So in high school, I was always involved in government, student government, or cultural groups, women leadership, just different leadership groups that kind of encouraged us to take on issues and organize either a poem or a play or something so that people could understand how it is that we are experiencing and understanding these things. And so the fact that I was always somewhat active socially and politically, it definitely contributed to what I wrote and kind of also my style of poetry.
Cool, yeah. Being socially and politically active will actually help you expand your vocabulary.
Yeah,
as
definitely,
well.
definitely.
So I think we're quite lucky today to have you on our show, because we're going to be having our second performance of your spoken word today. So we'd like to thank you for coming on our show today. Once again with Rhoda Hassan, If I Had a Daughter.
If I had a daughter, I will oil her hair like my mother did for me. I will tell her the tales of my grandfather so that she knows she comes from greatness. I will teach her her lineage so that when people ask her who she is, she will know the names of her ancestors like the back of her hands. She will know her past and use it as a guiding map to get to where she belongs. I will tell her that she is perfect. No products or tweaking will enhance her like a confident smile and a genuine heart. I will tell her it's not about the size of your hips or the length of your hair. She should be admired for her intelligence and character. But if anyone tells her she's pretty for a dark-skinned girl, I hope she tells them. I hope she tells them that black is the essence of mankind, beautiful in all of its shades and captivating in all of its forms. I will tell her that her features are reminiscent of Nubian queens who have ruled kingdoms for thousands of years. If I had a daughter, I will tell her it's not about the nights spent preparing for the future. Life is about watching the stars at night. Those are the moments when you will find yourself, when your heart guides you and becomes your roadmap. I will tell her to challenge any negative tradition, create a world where there are no prescribed guidelines for how to be yourself, and I will tell her to write her own rules on what it means to be a strong woman. If I had a daughter, when people ask her what she is, I hope she tells them that her identity has too many layers for her to uncover, that the spices in her house have originated from too many places for her to mention. But if they have enough time to listen, I hope she says that she is proud to be a Muslim, proud to be an Oromo, proud to be black, proud to be African, because she knows she comes from a line of greatness.